Today on Sleeping Dog Video, should you upgrade your Bambu Studio software and firmware? So the newest firmware that everyone's talking about and a lot have issues is firmware 01.08.05.00. And then there was an update to Bambu Studio software, which is the slicing software, independent of the firmware that actually runs the printer. So the Bambu Studio Lab software is version 2.0.1.50. Let's first talk about if you should upgrade in general. If you're trying to fix some bug, maybe you want to upgrade. If you're just upgrading like I did because it popped up on my printer, plus I think it said that it was supposed to, at least the Bambu Studio software was supposed to, that popped up on my printer was the firmware, just to distinguish between the firmware and the slicing software. So the slicing software called Bambu Studio, that is, as I said, version 2.0.1.50, 50, is the newest version. And I upgraded to both of those. And I upgraded, just to upgrade, I guess, to the firmware. And here nor there, if you can tell me that was a stupid thing to do, just upgrade to upgrade, and not upgrading because I was trying to fix anything. But the Bambu Studio, I believe I read in the notes that it was supposed to tweak the slicer so to have better slicing settings. And I thought it would be even better at quality and everything. Not that I was getting bad quality to begin with. So that's why I upgraded to the Bambu, at least the studio software. I wrote down some of the issues so I can go by my notes. I kind of assumed that all my profiles would still work the same with the new version. I've come to find out that with any new version of at least the Bambu Studio software side, you have to redial in all your settings. You got to retune your profiles again or reset them up. So if you have custom profiles, like I had custom profiles for my Sunlu PETG filament and everything, with the version I had originally after I bought my printer was, I'm looking at my notes, it should be 1.10.1.50. So 1.10.1.50 was the one I originally installed after doing the update after first getting my printer. So that one I dialed in, and then it became just super stable. I never had any or much of the issues that other people have probably reported. And I don't remember what those reports were, but I didn't really have any issues. So first, I should have keyed into that, not to upgrade, until I started having issues. There were a couple of things, like the Wi-Fi. When I first installed my printer, and if you watch my other videos of my my setup video, I said that my Wi-Fi arrows were out, so I had to get another arrow. So I was trying to get it to connect to the one way out in my living room, and my printer's back in my bedroom. Not a big house, but an old 1927 house, so a lot of plaster walls and everything. So Wi-Fi doesn't transmit very far. So I have to have two Eero. They're the Eero Pro 6E routers. So what happened was, so I got it connected back then. Then what happened is I got the new replacement Eero from my Sonic Internet. Nothing I say I'm getting money for that I bought, just what I use or what I like is what I'm recommending so far. So remembering back then, so I did that. And then from then on, what happened is you've got to remember this. So on the standpoint of the Wi-Fi connection and whether you have had bad, inconsistent Wi-Fi on your printer, which I have had, the thing is that you have two on your network. I have two arrows. This way out and showing kind of the living room way out here. This one closer to the printer in the kitchen, which is going to connect. If you are at the very, so the Wi-Fi can travel basically for newbies and not to get in a rabbit hole of Wi-Fi. But this is very important though to go over, so I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible with covering what I think is important on this channel that I think others maybe don't cover because they want to be flashy like I keep saying. So I'll keep repeating that over and over again on why my videos go on a little bit long, but I think are very important to cover. But I'm trying to make them as simple and as short as possible on the flip side. So back to the Wi-Fi, if it only travels about 30 feet before you can't get a signal anymore. If you are at about 28, 29 feet, you might get a signal. It might even show a strong signal, but you're going to drop out, drop in, drop out, drop in, and everything. And I should mention this to my sister thinking about it, because I'm thinking as I'm talking about a million things. So if you're that far from the base station, whether it's a cell tower for outside when you're on your cell phone, or it's your home router like my Eero, if you're at the complete end, and everyone, if you look it up to other people that know, that talk about Wi-Fi, they'll tell you if you're at the very end reach of your Wi-Fi, you're not going to get consistent signal. I figure that this printer's been out for about 2.5 years. It's only going to have what is called 2.4 gigahertz signal, and it's not going to be the best Wi-Fi in the circuitry in the printer. So I figure that is one issue. So it's not going to have the Wi-Fi 6 or 7 or Wi-Fi 5 gigahertz band, which may transmit a little bit better. So that's one issue. So what happens is that I have the one in the kitchen, if you can follow what I'm saying. The one in the kitchen is closer, so I might be within 10 to 15 feet of my kitchen router, but almost 30 feet of my living room router. Now, being within 15 feet, it should connect pretty darn strong, and that's what you want. You want to be in the 15 to 20 feet range or closer to your router for whatever device you're using, your laptop, your cell phone, or your printer. And that could be an inkjet printer or a 3D printer. Now, understanding that, there's another issue which is very important, which was happening to me when I was trying to set up, and I'll tell you what I did after installing. So that's another issue. First, when I installed the new version of Wi-Fi, no, not Wi-Fi, of the firmware and the Bambu Studio, that was one issue. Wi-Fi that I'm talking about is a separate issue, so I'm going to finish the Wi-Fi issue in general. This is general, independent of the firmware issue. So let's concentrate on the Wi-Fi issue so I can finish this, since I went down this rabbit hole. When you connect from a device, it doesn't always connect to the closest Wi-Fi router. I have two of them. I noticed that it kept dropping out when I tried to reconnect it after figuring out all these other issues, which I'll get to. But figure I had all these other issues, went back to my previous firmware and previous Bambu Studio, thought that would fix all the issues. Then I started having Wi-Fi issues again. And I figured out after diagnosing the Wi-Fi issues is that the Bambu printer was trying to connect to my living room Eero. And because it was trying to connect to my living room Eero, it was saying it connected. It was showing that it had a strong signal, but no, it was too far from the base station, they call it. And therefore, it was dropping out. I would get a signal for a few minutes, then it would drop out again. I got a signal for a few minutes, then it would drop out, then it would drop out, then it would drop out. If this is happening to you, remember what my fix was. So this is my fix. My fix is that the kitchen Eero, it was not connecting to the kitchen Eero. I tried physically turning off the power to the to my X1C carbon printer. That's cutting the power completely. There's the power, and then there's the standby mode. And I leave my printer in standby mode 100% of the time. It's drawing a little bit of power, but it's in standby mode, just like my latest Foley 3D Pro Epson printer for photographs, which is an excellent printer, but it also remains in standby mode, standby mode. And that's why I'm taking so long to explain this, because it's complicated and I don't want to really confuse people. So I'm trying to go as slowly as humanly possible to get through this subject matter and to get any newbies to understand and to paint a picture in one's mind of what happened. And that's why I have to go a little slow, and this is taking longer than maybe other people say it should. But I'm trying to paint a picture in people's mind of what happened. Once we get through this aspect of what I'm explaining, and then I'll get back and then we can get on and it'll be a little quicker. So try to stand with me on, or stay with me on this part, and then we'll get to the more fun parts. So I tried turning off. So what Bambu, the X1C and my Epson, what they like to do the best and what runs the best for those printers is to stay powered up but in standby mode. So you can send a print job to it, it'll print. You take your print off the printer, and you just leave it powered up. It goes into standby mode. You don't turn off the power. My Epson hated and would really kind of malfunction if you actually unplug the power like you would in old equipment. Old equipment, you would want to run something, then turn it off. In these newfangled equipment, printers like the Epson photo printers or this new X1C printer, I find that you should just leave it on. Once you set it up, once you find that it's working nice and smoothly and perfect, just leave it on. Unless you have a particular reason for shutting off the physical power, unplugging the power cord, or flicking the power switch on the back, just leave it on. It'll go into standby mode, and you should have no issues or very few issues. You may have a couple minor glitches here and there that I found workarounds, but other than that, you should have no issues. It's when you turn the power off and then recycle the power, and then you just, what's the saying? You just get more issues than I think a lot of maybe some of the issues that people are complaining about is because you're turning off the power, and you shouldn't turn off the power. Then you need to recalibrate. Like if I turn off the power, I'm going to have to recalibrate the Wi-Fi again. I'm going to have to turn the Wi-Fi off, turn the Wi-Fi on, make sure, this is the point I'm getting at, is I have to recalibrate when I turn off the power and turn it back on, or upgrade the firmware and then turn it off, turn it back on, recalibrate the printer. I have to recalibrate and make sure that the Wi-Fi from the printer is going to the right eero. That's the bottom line. If it's going to my living room eero, it's not going to work, and then it'll be totally crap. If it's going to my kitchen eero, oh man, once I got it getting yesterday or the day before, my printer back working, and it was going to the kitchen eero, and I can tell it's going to the kitchen eero because it's so much more responsive. It is like blazing speed to get it to hook to the camera. It is blazing speed to get it to download, whether you like to go through the internet or not, when I send a print to it. It is blazing fast now. It was a piece of crap before. And it was like I just blamed it on the software. I blamed it on the upgrade. I blamed it on going back to the previous version of some glitch. I blamed it on all those things. But I found out through trial and error and seeing how much faster it was, I knew, even though I didn't have something physically like software to test it, to tell me it was connected, I could tell by how blazing speed it was to go from my iPad in the living room through to my printer and connect to the camera, how blazing fast it was now. And I know that's because it's now connecting into the kitchen eero. I did have to I turned off and turned on my printer. That didn't seem to fix the problem. I turned off and rebooted my kitchen eero. Then I turned off and turned on, or I hit the button on the front panel to reconnect after the kitchen eero was fired back up and hooked to the network. I turned off and turned on my printer. I flicked the switch a couple times to reconnect the Wi-Fi to the router. And if that doesn't work, and that may have worked for me and may have not, I totally disconnected Wi-Fi from my Bambu Labs, and I reset it up with my home password to the network. And doing that a couple times back and forth, I finally got it to connect to the kitchen Eero and not hook to the living room Eero. And when that happened, and you just got to keep trying it. You got to keep trying unplugging it, unplugging the router, plugging it back in, turning off your X1C, turning back on your X1C, back and forth, until finally, click, and it will be lightning fast. But work through that until then. So that's all the advice I can give you. That just keep working through. And I blame, too, Bambu Studio. It was their fault. The network was a piece of crap and everything. And I find in my case that partly was maybe true, but that once I got it to connect into the kitchen Eero, this is the last I'm going to say about that, and then get another swig of coffee. That I have rarely any problems. Maybe now and again I have to flick the switch and reconnect my X1C back to the Wi-Fi every now and again, but it doesn't happen like daily, and it doesn't happen hourly, and it doesn't happen so much I'm pulling my hair out. It's like maybe weekly or monthly. And I've been printing a lot. Damn, if I can say that, if that's not too much of a swear word, but damn a lot of printing since I bought my X1C back on the U.S. Black Friday during the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. When I bought my 3D printer, I've been printing and printing and printing and printing. And once I got the issue done, but I had to figure out that issue when I tried to go to the nearest firmware. Now I can try to tell you in the next segment, and I'll put you on pause, but this is just in the last day or two. These are all the little test prints. What is there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm printing one more out. 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 test prints within like a day. I've been printing because each one takes about 20 or 30 minutes to print each one of my test prints. I'm trying to get the size correctly so these two pieces will fit together with the least amount of wobble. I don't want it way up here when I have a long rod that I'm extending and have it wobble around too much. So I was trying to get the little spacing, so that's why I printed so many of this. And look at this, how pretty this is. So I'm going to explain that in the next segment. So that's all I have to say on the Wi-Fi issue. I'll be back after a swig of coffee. Back on my 3D printing journey of learning, and we're all learning. We should all continue to learn. Learn as much as you can about if you enjoy the subject of 3D printing. Don't just want to throw something on and print. That's great too. But the learning process is wonderful as well. Learning in design, learning in how to fix 3D printers when you have a problem. As I've been saying in the past, I did so much on trying to fix 3D printers that I never got around to the fun of design. Now, if you can hear in my voice how happy I am that I am back to the design and the 3D printing projects, I'm getting much closer to my final design on my journey of my main product that I keep showing off, but don't want to show too much or tell you too much because I want to manufacture this product. And it's a long step between getting this design into a test phase, which I'm getting very close to within the next few weeks, hopefully, and to a first stage test. And then I will get to the next stage of if it works, so I have to refix it because something broke when I go out and test it. And then I have to see how I can get maybe 10 to 30 of the product manufactured. And all that, if somebody wanted to give any advice, you don't have to, but would be appreciated. Or make your own video around it. One guy I wish I could give credit to, but does videos on manufacturing for 3D printing. And I watch his videos, and he is great on showing you. And I've tried to make my videos, it's not just designing the product and getting something that works, but which is hard enough, but it's also making it so it's repeatable on any 3D printer. That's what this guy, go look it up and then watch his videos as well. Okay, so since, whether dumb or not dumb, you be the judge, but I upgraded when it said upgrade. I was going to print something, and then it said that it popped up on my printer that there was an upgrade. So I decided, oh boy, I'm going to upgrade, just like I upgrade my iPhones all the time, because I want the bugs fixed. The iPhone has so many bugs, like in Siri and everything else, and I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I always want the latest and hope that they fix or add a feature that makes my camera on my iPhone better, which here nor there whether that works. But anyway, so I immediately upgraded to the latest firmware, and I believe it is the firmware is 01.08.05.00. And the Bambu Studio one, the latest one, I found that same time that there was a new version of Bambu Studio, 2.0.1.50. Now, I was in the thinking that it didn't occur to me that I would have to redo all my filaments that I had made filament profiles, and that I had to redo all my filament profiles just because I updated my Bambu Labs Studio software. Now, I'm going to first go into the issues. Some of the issues I was having was one print would turn out like this, almost perfect. The next print would either turn out, this is another perfect print. Another, I don't have one to show you, but one print would turn out partially bad or totally spaghetti print, the next print, and then back and forth. I had one that even came loose off the bed. I had two parts. I was printing three parts together, which were about this tall, 249 millimeters. They were these parts, but in 249 millimeters. So three of these on the build plate was one issue, and one even toppled over. When it got to the last third of the print, it toppled over and came off the build plate. One went up a couple layers off the bottom and just went into spaghetti printing, and I decided to cancel it, but it never detected spaghetti. I don't know if it eventually would have if I let it go long enough or not, but I decided to cancel it. And all these issues I wasn't having with the firmware that I had installed, you see, which was version 1.10.1.50. That was the firmware I had in the firmware of the Bambu Studio software that I think the Bambu Studio software I was using was 1.10.1.50. I think it might have been, but I'm not positive, so don't quote me on it. But I think it was 1.10. 2.76 was one of the ones I tried. And maybe it was 1.10.2. Yeah, maybe that was the one. Could have been one even earlier version. But anyway, I know that the Bambu Studio software, the one that I'm running now of the Studio software, is 1.10.1.50. So that was it. Then I was getting, some people reported in the past that the wiping function on the Bambu C printers wasn't very good, and so it wouldn't wipe the nozzle very well, and then it would leave a glob of filament on your first layer. Now, I wondered, the first thing I wondered was that the issue? And was I having to change out the nozzle wipe hardware function of the printer? Because what happened was I would get these globs of filament coming out of the printer. So what would happen was I would have 3 sections, and so I had like one here, and then I had one here, and I also had like one part here. I was printing 3 on the bed, and what happened was that this part, the base of the part, I usually have an outside brim. So I usually, instead of having a raft, I just have a 5-line outside brim. For outside, I specify in the other section of Bambu Studio an outside brim only. And then I had a perfect, for this one, I had a perfect first layer. And then the middle part of the bed, I was getting these globs of filament about this high, about 2 globs. And I wondered why, if it was that it didn't wipe the filament when I was watching it. So I watched it during the first layer, and I saw that if it was that it didn't wipe the filament on this print, which was in the front of the bed, and then these were about the middle of the bed, the other 2. So these were in the middle of the bed, if you can get a picture, was this one didn't have a glob, and if it was that it didn't wipe correctly, it would have had a glob here, because that's the first place where it's going to touch the nozzle. I always have a priming, and I think it looks like, through the lights and watching the head, it looks like it also does metering of the priming lines, and there's a little bit of pattern in the priming lines. So I wonder if it's doing AI off the priming lines. So I wouldn't probably, in my opinion, I wouldn't probably stop using the priming lines unless you've experienced otherwise. So I use all the functions on my printer, because true, in printing something like this, half of the time of the print time is in all the AI detection stuff. But I want this to print perfect. So even if it's going to take half the print time to do it, I'd rather have that and use that. So it went to the first layer, and then I figured if there was stuff on the nozzle, it would show up in this part. So this part, first layer, should have the globs on it. And there were perfectly no globs. It was when it went to the middle part, it spat out or spit 2 globs on here, just 2. Then the rest of the print all the way up, if it didn't fail because it hit on the globs. Sometimes the print head and the AI, if it's not a big glob, it'll print over the top of it and it'll keep going. That's what's so great about the AI in Bambu, in the Bambu Carbon X1 printer, is that it prints and remarkably well when other printers would fail. It can print, and it can like melt the filament that was a semi-glob or a small that wasn't too tall of a glob. It can print over the top of it and still continued on. Or if there's a minor spaghetti print, it can align the print head again and continue on, and you have mostly you might have a ever so slight layer shift, but you have still a pretty print that didn't fail, that you didn't have to start over after 10 hours of printing. Most printers, you would have to do that. What I found out was that I analyzed it, and then came into, see, I was printing PETG in ludicrous mode, so the Sunlu, which I talked about in my other videos, the Sunlu filament, I'm able to, this the clear, and then I've tried the white, but roll after roll, I'm able to, not the super high speed version, but just the regular Sunlu, I'm able to print, and I was printing at 255 degrees C, and I was printing, before I installed all the firmware and everything, I was printing at 255 degrees C, first layer and all layers, and in ludicrous mode, 166%, however fast that is. I don't think that's more than about 270 millimeters per second. When I looked at what the fastest layer speed was on my prints. That made me think that if the first layer over here, and I have to go into this before I can go back, because you think I'm going down a rabbit hole again, but no, I have to explain this, and then I'll go back to why I went back to my first version of the firmware, and it's all related at least. Even if I'm taking too long, it's all related. So I think it's important to get this if you really want to learn something. Now, if you just want to skip over, fine, go ahead. If you really want to learn something, this is the process, and this is why I have to take this amount of time and explain it. So what I figured was it was oozing out of the print head, where it didn't seem to be oozing out of the print head before I upgraded the firmware. That's the thing. When you upgrade the firmware, it's another thing that gets into your head that, oh, is it the firmware that's the issue? Or is it this? Is it oozing? That's the issue. Or is it blah, 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 the issue? Or blah, 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 the issue. And that gets in your head, and you got to narrow these things down. You got to start cutting these things out. Otherwise, you get too many things. So what I would normally do in the process was I would try 2 things and print. Let's say I would, it doesn't matter what it is. It's widgets, like in accounting. but it's widget means anything. So just 2 apples, 2 oranges, try anything you want. Replace for a widget. If you get into thinking that a widget and you have to know what a widget is and all that, you'll miss the point of the discussion of me or anybody else. So it doesn't matter what the widget is in the conversation. So what you want to do is weed out one step, one thing at a time, and then narrow down, and finally you get down to the last thing on your list that you know, then that has to be either the issue or you figured out from the last thing you iterated or you took out of the equation was the issue. So then you finally figure out what the issue is. Too many things, if you have 5 things that could be the issue, you're just going to take a week of Sundays to figure out. So that's the process of elimination. Back to all this discussion, I found out that it was, for some reason, maybe I was printing so fast and never let the bed cool like I was doing before, because I would go in and I would take my parts off that were only this big off my bed, and I wanted to start another part. So maybe the inside my printer, because I never leave the door open like it recommends, and my PLA and PETG prints turn out just fine, so I never see in my area. And it all depends on your humidity plus temperature in your house, room, garage, and outside temperature all play a part in whether it works for you and whether you have to go in what's recommended on the internet, and then you have to tweak it for your situation. So that's what I would recommend also, is a good point. Find out what's recommended on the internet, but don't take that as, quote, the gospel, meaning that should work for you. And, well, that didn't work for me, blah, blah, blah. 1, that may be true. 2, take it as a baseline, because if it works with one person, his environment is going to be with these filaments and how they absorb moisture. Remember, that's just a baseline of what you should start. Then you have to be willing to tinker with that and come up with what works in your particular environment. In your particular house, even someone down the street in their house is going to be totally different. And someone, I'm in California and you may be in New England somewhere, or in Canada, or in Germany or somewhere, and your mileage, as they say, will vary and everything. So take all these things you learn on the internet as a learning process, yes, great, but as a baseline, as something to try as a starting point. Then from there, you have to tweak the settings. Tweak the settings in your slicer. Tweak the settings in the temperature of your filament and stuff. Tweak the settings of how much drying to do. Tweak the settings, which I'm going to get into, which is part of what I learned in my area. Tweak the settings on how often you clean your print bed. Gets me into the next point. So I found out that 255C that was working for my filament for all layers wasn't. Okay, so before I say that, I'm saying, well, it wasn't working, everything, so I had these globs, I had all the issues I had before, so I was just wanting to get back to printing again. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go back to my original firmware that I had. I knew it was reliable, my original version of Bambu Studio that I knew was reliable. I'm going to go back to those two versions, and I struggled on learning how to do that, and so I don't go down another rabbit hole. I could explain how to reinstall those firmware versions, but that's for another video. But when I got back to my original firmware version, some of these issues, which I will explain in a split second, cleared up the issues I was having with the new firmware and my issues. So it might be nice to stick around even if this doesn't quite pertain to your issue. It might, a tidbit might pertain to your issue, and you might say, oh, I didn't know about that point, like I've done on the Bambu Studios and stuff websites or forums. And a tidbit helped me when I thought the video or the discussion didn't help me. But then it was like, that was really good. So back to this. So then I should have tried adjusting. Clean. Well, I should have tried cleaning my print bed. So the metal sheet. I should have tried using. I have in my area 91, I believe, maybe it's 92% isopropyl alcohol. So I spray that. I spray that on sometimes and clean off my build sheet. And I'm using the textured build sheet that came with my X1C. And so far it works well. And I haven't wanted to, because it works so well and I'm getting such incredible prints that I haven't wanted to try anything else at the moment, because I just want the fun of printing, and I'm afraid actually to use anything else that might hamper my great printing. So right now I just want to print. One day I might try a different type build plate, maybe a build plate that gets my bottom of my prints a little smoother. So if I want to manufacture stuff, it won't look so much like I 3D printed it. So I should have tried cleaning the build plate. I should have tried, I'm looking at my notes, printed perfect. So the one that printed perfect and the one that failed, I chalked it up to the AI didn't work very well. But maybe it was because I never cleaned my build plate in umpteen prints. So maybe that was part of the issue, and that would have been an easy fix. So now I'm cleaning my build plate because of another issue where I printed like 5 or 10 of these, and then I got one that was a complete first layer spaghetti print, and as soon as I cleaned it with isopropyl alcohol, it went down to sticking well again. So now I'm back to the notion that because I printed so much that I'm doing the maintenance of every about 3 to 5 prints, I'm cleaning it really quickly with isopropyl alcohol, and then it did stick well again. So maybe I'm just getting into using my printer so much that I have to do more maintenance than I used to. So I didn't know that, and I blamed the AI. So I don't know if the AI is still the issue, because I've gone back to the old firmware. So the nozzle, one print would print great, fine, easy to pick up off the at 250. This is at 255C for all layers. It would come off, and then another print would stick so hard it would actually leave part of the bottom layer onto the build plate, and I'd have to scrape and scrape. It didn't hurt the build plate, but I'd have to scrape and scrape and scrape to get to get it off. So it would about this much of one of those prints it would leave behind. Now my build plate and everything, I don't have to ever use glue stick. Since I got my, what is it, December, January, February, March, this is now April. So in 5 months of printing, and I've done one of the maintenance, which is cleaning the inside and cleaning the rods and everything. I did that maintenance already. Oh, and I did, which is another thing I have to remind myself, so I'm going to write it down so I remind myself to point out, is cleaning, cleaning, the sensor and camera so the 255 degree filament temperature. Then I found out I had one back to the good print, and then I had one that would have the globs of filament on it, and therefore I would get a spaghetti print because it would knock the nozzle onto. I even had one at the very beginning, which was a tail sign when I first installed the newest firmware. What happened was I was calibrating. I printed one print, and I guess it turned out all right as far as I can remember. And then I remembered, and I wish Bambu would tell you in its software, because it tells you everything else about what's going on with the printer and your print so well. I love that. But I wish it would tell you also to update, to recalibrate the printer after a firmware update. Because I forgot about that until I remembered reading it on one of the forums. Calibrate the printer again after a firmware update, whether you're updating or you're downgrading, or after a new filament profile, recalibrate the printer. That's the one that does the nozzle and the other stuff, the vibration and everything, the 15-minute one. I didn't watch it, but it must have either banned, I think it scratched the bed a little bit, or at least the spring sheet. Didn't hurt the nozzle, I guess, but it enough that it knocked the front plate. And I love that it's on by not by clips but by magnets, so it doesn't of your hot end shroud, because then it can knock off and it doesn't hurt anything because it knocks off the magnets. So what it did, it knocked off the magnets, but it did come up with a message that something was wrong with the print head. I forget the exact message. But so that happened like early on, like the first one or second print. So that was kind of skeptical on why it smashed into. And then I think that was even after I did the calibration. So I did one print and it worked fine. Then I did the calibration, and then I think it smashed the print head into the nozzle into the bed, and then I put it on, and then I don't remember the exact steps on what happened next, but then I had all the issues with, I didn't think the spaghetti detection, it was detecting the AI, that and maybe some other AI issues where I didn't think it was detecting the AI as well. And so issues. So that led me to believe that the firmware was the issue and not some of this recalibrating the filaments and in the slicer, or recalibrating the or cleaning the doing cleaning maintenance, things like that was the issue. But because I upgraded the firmware, I introduced all these other things. So now it's probably like an hour into the whole thing. So anyway, so I'm going to cut it there. So I decided to cut my losses, go back to the original firmware and that I was running. So I went back to the original firmware. Took me a struggle to figure out where to download. And it was sort of easy to know how to update the firmware. I updated it from my iPad, Bambu Handy app. That was pretty straightforward because I asked Gemini how to do it. And it was pretty straightforward how to reinstall the previous firmware for the printer. So I did that, and then, but it was much harder to find out where the firmware, and I never did find out where to download the firmware for the, and I'm talking about the fully installed or fully compiled firmware. I'm not talking about the GitHub repository where you have to compile your own firmware. No, I wanted to find the firmware that was already compiled, and I couldn't find out where it was, but searching, and I finally found the right, which was just frustrating for me. I found by asking question after question in different forms on Gemini and in the forums and different places, finally found out what the name of the firmware I was looking for was that I was using originally. Finally, I was able to search for that name on my Mac, M1 Max Mac, MacBook Pro, and then I found out that I still, luckily, and I knocked on wood and hallelujah, that I was able to have that still on my Mac, and I thought I had deleted it or written over it. And so I was able to reinstall the firmware from that version, but I never could find it on the internet, not the DMG Mac compiled version. And I say right here, right now, that I pleaded and I even stated on Bambu Lab forums that please, Bambu, allow under your website, that Bambu Lab's website, it has the latest version of the software, but it does not have, and I say that strongly, not with capital letters, exclamation points, doesn't have the previous versions compiled. I want the previous versions compiled, the dates of the previous versions as well as the names, the compiled versions, the ones that Bambu would have, until the next version came out, would have put on their website as versions they released to the public. Versions, not pre-release versions, none of this branch versions, the ones that Bambu authorizes. I want those to be on their website under a heading that's easy to find. I want them to have a category for the newest version, click here. For previous versions, click here. And easily to install the previous version, click here, download one file, install, end of story, done. That would have been so much easier. The hours I spent I shake my head because the hours of frustration, I shook my head on trying to find the right version to reinstall was nuts. And it didn't need to be nuts. I know that Bambu may have wanted to make this, didn't want to confuse newbies into installing the wrong version of the software, but they made my situation I can't even describe how frustrating and nuts the process was. But once I found out that I had it on my printer, my computer, it was easy. I got up and running again. So let me have another swig of coffee, and on to the next issue I was still having after reinstalling back to my previous setup. Reinstalling back to my previous setup. Coming back to my previous setup, there were two issues. One issue was that I was still getting, on the first layer of my prints, I was still getting these two globs of filament, and everything else would print great. I was getting two globs. I'd let it go far enough into the second or third layer to before the head nozzle would bang into the globs, and then I would get a spaghetti print started. So I tried that as a test. Sometimes, as I said before, sometimes why I tried that test, because sometimes if the glob isn't high enough, Bambu Studio with the AI, which is so incredible, it'll print over the top and melt and kind of melt the glob into the print. And if it's into the, the infill, it'll print and you'll never notice the little glob. If it's low enough and not too high, it'll do that, and then it'll print the whole thing up, and you'll never know that a glob was there. So sometimes that'll happen. That's why sometimes you want to let go. Also, I find when you're looking through the camera's good, or any camera is good at seeing whether you have spaghetti or whether you have other major problems. But knowing whether you have little globs and glitches on your print, things that I think are globs and stuff, and I stop my print, I go in there and I find out that no, it was actually perfect, just that it just doesn't show that much detail on the cameras. That means I had a Wise camera I was using for my other printer, Bedslinger, for a while, and even that, it only is an approximation. So little things, I find out that if it's very small, make sure let it go a little bit, and until you see major spaghetti, then I would stop the print. But little things, I would let it go, because usually it's still a great print, even though it looked like it failed. So it was still getting globs. Then I discovered, through the whole thing in my discussion before, I discovered that it was oozing, long story short to this point, or shorter. It is that it was oozing out of the print head. Now, what I thought, it was printing just fine at 255 degrees C for mini print with the Sunlu PETG filament. So I finally realized, yes, it is just oozing too much out of the nozzle. So what I determined, bottom line is, I determined that I tried getting it to, I discovered early on with other prints before the filament, the firmware upgrade and everything, early on, that at the very top of some of my prints, there were little globs of filament. So what I did was I added a Z-hop, 0.4 millimeter Z-hop to the layers. And even though that adds a tiny bit of time to your prints, I found out that eliminated the globs on the very top layer of the print. So I forgot that I had to, in resetting up in this issue, in resetting up my filament profile, I needed to go back in and add the Z-hop height and a couple of other issues under issues or settings under retraction. I left retraction, I think, at 30 millimeters per second, but I enabled a couple other options under the filament settings and then retraction settings. And I turned a few of those on, but that wasn't completely helping the first layer globs. So then what I did was I went into the next thing you want to try is cooling. Well, you could add more cooling, or you could, which I did, was my filament, you can go from 220 to 270 is what it recommends on Sunlu PETG filament. So I was at 255. So then I went down to 250 for all layers. Then I went down to 245 on all layers. And that still wasn't quite, that was better, but it wasn't quite doing it. Then, this is after I went back to my previous firmware, so I know that the firmware, when I said I had to cut out problems to dwindle down what the problems could be to get me back to perfect prints again, I took out, so I know it wasn't the firmware again, because I went back to the previous firmware. So it had to have been something else that happened at the same time I upgraded the firmware. That is the issue now. So now I took that out of the equation for the firmware. So now I went down to 245. That was better, but still wasn't helping the issue. Then the next thing I tried was, it was only once it could get through the first layer, all the other layers were perfect. The complete print was completely perfect. It was just that first layer, and it wasn't detecting a bad first layer AI. So but it was doing those globs, and it was doing those spurts of globs. And so when it went, and when I noticed early on other issues I talked about, where one print, when I had 3 prints going, one print was perfect, it went over here and started spurting out, then it led me to believe also that during the travel move, it wasn't retracting enough into the printer or into the print head. So we travel move, and then it was oozing during travel. And so that's what I tried to do, was look into retracting more during travel. So there's travel moves, and the retraction for travel moves, and just regular retraction during printing and the different layers. So since it was the first layer of the second set of prints on the same bed, I thought it was in the travel moves, but that didn't, that was a good try and fix, but that wasn't the exact problem. So what I end up finding was, so far, and maybe down the road I'll have to adjust it a little bit, but so far I ended up coming out with having a first layer at 240 degrees C, with keeping all the retraction moves and travel moves, so it would retract. What I have also in my settings is, I think it's 0. So, well, there's retraction for travel moves, the length. So it's like detect 1 millimeter travel move before the retraction happens in the filament nozzle. I decided to have it retract 0, so I put 0 in there. So it retract to 0. So immediately when it raised the head to go into a travel move, it would raise the head, retract, then travel. It wouldn't raise the head, travel, retract, and then travel some more, because my theory was it would raise the head, travel a millimeter while oozing out on an angle, then retract, then travel. So my theory was it would raise the head, retract, then travel, and if it retracted correctly, it wouldn't ooze out as it was traveling. So that was my theory, and I think that was a sane, known theory, but that didn't help me. That may help some people, so I would try that. And for the little bit of length of time, another 5 minutes of print time, I would just keep that enabled, because it helps for my top layers. As you can see here, my top layers are just gorgeous, perfect. I can't complain with this print, and so no gloves, no stringing, no nothing, like these prints. There's no stringing whatsoever in this print. It's as gorgeous, I can't say more. So, and that is also in ludicrous mode, remember. So that's even more amazing. So, but I've dialed everything in. So that's worth it to dial everything in. The bottom line is I went down to 240 for my first layer, and I went to 250 for the printing, because I found at 250 or 255, which would allow it to ooze a little more, but also allow, if I go up in the speed, it'll allow it to flow better. And I have it automatically calculating the flow at the beginning of every print. So I know it takes an extra like 5-10 minutes to calculate it all, but I just keep that enabled. To have the reliable prints I get, it's worth the 10 minutes to, set it and forget it. So, which it was just amazing to me, which I love. Other people may have other reasons for doing it differently, but I love to set it and forget it. So that's actually to the end of my story. It's probably like an hour and a half by now, but I think there's some good stuff in here. Like other people say, I applaud you, and I hope you learned something if you stood by me at the end of this video. So I'm finally back to printing, and everything looks good. My project's getting more done and more done. I'm going to go in and get my next part. Let me show you on my next part. This is one of my parts. And then this I'm trying to get to stick in here. This one now sticks in here. So I got that piece correct. Now this, see, doesn't stick in here yet. So I need to adjust the percentage of space in here. So when this goes in here, then I need a pin, and I found out how to do a pin. So I need to construct that to go in here, and then these will telescope out, and there'll be a pin in here. I think I'm going to use for my pin a screw and a knob piece that's going to go on here, and a screw here with a compression spring, and then the compression spring will go in here. This will ride in here. See how I have channels? So the compression spring will go back in here far enough back that then this will ride up and down in here, and then this will go up, and then the compression spring will go in here. I just have to make sure that when I screw the screw to with a flathead, when I screw this to this part, the knob, that when I pull the knob in and out, it doesn't loosen up and strip out, because I don't want that to happen. Otherwise, I'm not really sure how to make a pin. Unless I do it that way, I'm not sure how to make a pin, because I don't know if there's another way to design a pin. But I might put on mine, like the Loctite blue or the Loctite red, when I get a final decision. Loctite blue in the United States, what it's called, name brand, but nothing in my videos I'm getting paid for. The Loctite blue will allow you to, with enough force, undo the spring. When I get a version that I want to actually go out and test, I'm going to put Loctite blue on, and then I'm going to use that for a while. And when I go to one I may want to manufacture, I'm going to put Loctite red, if that's my final version, and then I will do it that way so it doesn't come undone. Because I think my version of that, of the spring mechanism pin, works if it doesn't come undone. I had to do this part so I could then put, when I have a screw mechanism, I can put to put the pieces together when assembling, I can put a screwdriver in here and then go hold the screw in with the compression spring, and then be able to screw on the whatever knob I'm using, whether I print out my whole knob or whether I get one at the hardware store, depending on the prices, or have knobs made out of metal. I have to see if I want to print them out of plastic. I have a nice knob here that looks really nice. Knob here, this was another design which I found out didn't really work the way I wanted as iterations go. But this knob I think looks pretty and feels pretty good in your hand, but it's made out of plastic, so I'd have to put a metal insert within this to make sure that it doesn't strip out on the force of pulling the pin in and out. So I could have this maybe made out of metal, and therefore it won't strip in and out so easily. I would love to print this out of plastic, be able to put an insert. I've tried those heat inserts. This is the end of the story, but this heat insert in here, And then I'm still learning how to do it correctly, because I put the heat insert in. Maybe I have a soldering iron that's too hot, and because it melts too much the plastic, and therefore the heat insert won't stay in very well. I've only done about a half dozen, so I'm not an expert by any means on it. People can comment what I'm doing wrong, and if you want to help me on that part, if you stayed around this long. But this one, but then I want it secure enough that it's not going to pull out. Now I was thinking I could put it in, and if I have the right glue to maybe permanently glue it in, but I'd have to find out what glue is going to work, since this is PETG and I'm trying to then glue it to brass or metal. So I have to figure out that, because I haven't really worked with glues before. So I don't know what glues work with all these different filaments. So for John, this is Sleeping Dog Video.